Introductory. The years 1948 to 1950 saw the evening shadows gathering and closing on the mortal coil of the Master. Advancing age brought a series of mishaps to it: a fall, a nervous hiccup lasting many days, a clinging rheumatism, and lastly a malignant tumor which inch by inch ate at the flesh of his left arm, poisoned his blood, and finally rained down the curtain on a life purer than that which has never been nor will ever be. Of these 2 critical years, I felt a strong urge to keep a diary to record the Maharshi's movements, talks, and the condition of his health, for no other object than to perpetuate for myself his blessed memory. But after his Mahanirvana, I felt the same urge to share it with his devotees in order to bring back to them those hallowed scenes and events which marked the last days of his earthly life. Some of the talks I incorporated in Part 2 of this book. Since that never-to-be-forgotten night of April 14, 1950, when the Maharshi for the last time laid down his body and completely merged in the peace everlasting, from which there is no return, many of his close disciples have also shed their bodies and followed him. The others who are still with us, and who in the beginning took some time to recover from the painful void which his physical absence had created in their lives, continue to feel his holy presence, particularly in their meditation, which proves the scriptural pledge that the spiritual link that nature forges between master and disciple, time, the all-destroyer, has no power to break, till the disciple succeeds in scaling the same height as the master and attains union with him. An article about Sri Maharshi has appeared in the Free Press, Madras. Professor Subbaramaya of Nellore reads it aloud so that all present may hear. Sri Maharshi intently follows in another copy so intently that one would think he was correcting an important manuscript. He occasionally passes humorous remarks and broadly smiles. In the end, he directs his attendant to cut and paste it in the special file. 17th June, 8:30 a.m. Jagadish Shastri, a Sanskrit scholar and Maharshi's devotee, arrives from Madras. Sri Bhagavan enters into an earnest conversation with him. I hear him counting on his fingertips, tanana, tana, tana, from which I infer they are discussing meter of Sanskrit verse. Sri Bhagavan goes on speaking and gesticulating uninterruptedly for about 20 minutes, obviously explaining some passages. Then Sri Shastri mentions Vida Ranya as saying the Chit can be Shiva and Shakti at one and the same time, as well as separately. Sri Bhagavan quotes from Arunachala Purana that in essence both are one and the same Chit, and reads from his book with deep emotion. He goes into ecstasy on Gautama's praise of Shiva. Though smiles light his face, tears pour out of his eyes, of which none has a suspicion, till he wipes them and blows his nose. It is now 9:55. Sri Maharshi suddenly realizes that he is late for his usual small walk by 10 minutes. Also late, he remarks, and takes to oiling his knees and hip joints to ease their rheumatic stiffness before rising. Pointing to his body, he says smilingly, "This machine cannot move without oiling." The famous cow Lakshmi, the pet of the ashram, who has been ailing since some time, today passed away at about noon, having known of her approaching death. Sri Maharshi went to the Goshala, the cowhouse, at about 9:45 a.m., sat on the ground, put her head in his lap, and stroked it gently, repeating with infinite tenderness, "Lakshmi ma, Lakshmi, Lakshmi," to comfort her in her last hour. At 6:30 p.m., Lakshmi's body was brought in a cart to the north of the dining hall for burial. All the ashramites gathered, and in the midst of them sat Sri Maharshi on a chair. While the Brahmins were giving her the ceremonial bath as they do to a human body, with dozens of pots of water, Sri Bhagavan softly told her life story to those standing by his side, how she had been brought to the ashram in 1924 as a calf 6 months old, and how she lived longer than the usual 20-year span. He praised her sweet, affectionate nature and her intelligence, adding, she might have been a sadhaka in the past, which made her deserve to be brought to the ashram to attain mukti. Bath over, the Brahmin smeared her whole body with turmeric and marked her forehead with sacramental vermilion, kumkum. They decked her with fresh jasmine garlands and put a new red silk scarf round her neck, then burnt camphor and incense near her. She was then wheeled a few yards away for burial, to witness which Sri Bhagavan had with difficulty to climb a few steps. I have never seen Sri Maharshi so weak as this evening. After the burial of Lakshmi, the people began to disperse, and he too was attempting to descend the 3 steps near the dispensary with the help of the wall. But he started vacillating and shaking. Although the steps were broad and of moderate height, he was not able to negotiate them alone. 2 attendants held him at the hips and helped him down them. It was with great trepidation that we watched him through the process, and when we saw him reach the flat ground safely, we heaved a sigh of relief. He generally does not like anyone to interfere with him or offer him a helping hand. He hardly accepts the help of his own attendants and often tells them to mind their own business. We can only look on at his difficulties and feel sad at heart that we can do nothing for him. 21st, 1948. Yesterday, Sri Maharshi composed a quatrain on Lakshmi in Tamil, giving the date and the astrological sign of her death, referring to her as a liberated soul, for which he used the Sanskrit word vimukti, to make it quite clear that it was not merely release from the body that he meant, but final emancipation. This morning he translated his quatrain into Telugu and showed it to the Telugu devotee Professor Subbaramaya, over which both of them joked and laughed, because Sri Bhagavan had used Tamil meter for a Telugu poetry, as he had done in his own Ekatma Panchakam, the 5 verses on the oneness of Atman. Professor Subbaramaya highly praised Sri Bhagavan's Telugu versification. In the evening, Maharshi translated the same quatrain from the original Tamil into Malayalam. 23rd June, 4:30 p.m. Mrs. F. Telayarkhan hands Maharshi 2 letters. One is from Dr. T.N. Krishnaswamy, Madras, in which he writes that his own cow has given birth to a she-calf, which he has named Pushpam 4 hours after Lakshmi's death, but that when later he heard of the latter, he turned the name to Lakshmi Pushpam. Bhagavan reads the letter aloud and gesticulates smilingly. The other letter is from Sri C. Rajagopa Palacharya, Governor General of India, in which he accepts Mrs. Telayarkhan's invitation to open the temple, which he has built over the Patala Lingam, where Sri Maharshi spent the first 6 months of his stay at Tiruvannamalai in 1896. June 24th, 9 a.m. The Maharshi is reading and talking in a cheerful mood. The white peacock strolls in, pecks a few grains placed for him by the attendant, and walks off confidently a short distance. A crow drops in and sets to pecking hastily at the grains. Bhagavan draws our attention to the scene. The peacock stands aghast at the scandalous encroachment of the crow. Horrified, he spreads his feathers round his back, cranes his neck, and looks fiercely at the crow, as if to spring. Now he steps forward with an extremely bellicose gait. We all thought that a terrific battle was going to be waged before our eyes. To our astonishment, the crow proves brazen-faced, as he remains unmoved. He watches the peacock mockingly with one eye, and with the other continues to peck greedily. Obviously, he knows his man. Still, we are apprehensive of the fate of the crow. But alas, the peacock, instead of advancing, suddenly falls 2 hurried steps back and stops meditatively, planning, we thought, a violent blitzkrieg. We waited, but when at last the assault did come, it was only a single resolute step forward followed by a dead halt. By now all the grains have peacefully reposed into the crow's belly, who then hops to the water in the cement basin nearby, drinks his fill, wipes his beak on the hard ground, bows in deep salute to the proud peacock, and flies contentedly away. The Maharshi and all of us had a hearty laugh at the cowardice of the peacock, who now cools down, lowers his feathers, and struts away with a feeble show of bravery. We were thoroughly amused. Sri Bhagavan has all along been very fond of watching the behavior of animals, and has thus become an expert in anticipating their reactions in given circumstances and in knowing how to deal with them to help them. His sympathy and consideration for them seem to exceed even those for humans, yet he sometimes appears gently severe with them, which puzzles some devotees, as it did once puzzle me in the following incident, which was entered into my diary under the date of 28th March, 1943, which I feel to the point to record hereunder. On the 24th instant at 10:30 a.m., the master was dozing. A female squirrel leaped onto his couch and bit his thumb, which he quickly pulled back and stroked, remarking, "I'll not feed her." Other squirrels crowded on his couch for half an hour, and for half an hour he continued to feed them with cashew nuts, 1 nut at a time to each. Then he turned to us, pointing to one of them, and said, "This she-squirrel has been trying to fool me, thinking I do not recognize her, and so shall feed her. Once she comes from this side, once from the other, once from under the couch, and once from above it. But I recognize her very well. She shall not have anything," and laughed. At the following vague thought crossed my mind. Where is the Christ injunction that if a man slaps you on one cheek, offer him the other? Today a squirrel jumped from the window to the couch. The master looked at it intently. He gave it a nut, then another, and addressed it. "Now go. Have you come to bite me again?" I quickly guessed that that was the guilty squirrel of 4 days ago, and wondered how Sri Bhagavan recognized it and relented. Nevertheless, I asked him if my guess was right, and he confirmed it. After a while, the same squirrel came back for more nuts. Usually the master continues to feed the animals till of their own accord they cease to come. But to this one he refused to give again, and, seeing it persisting, he lifted his fan and thread, which made it disappear at once. Then he sat with pensive look and a faint smile on his face. After a while he turned in my direction, broadened his smile, and softly spoke in Tamil in his usually telegraphic brevity to my neighbor. Even animals understand a rebuke, and if it is repeated a sufficient number of times, they learn to behave. Some of them are more sensible than some others. This was immediately translated to me. I laughed, frankly admitted the vague thought I had on the first day, and added that although I had never doubted Sri Bhagavan's wisdom, that thought needed the explanation, which made the master nod approvingly. 4 p.m., Maharshi is handed a book, which he turns over and over excitedly, exclaiming, "Rai, Rai, Rai!" It is a Tamil translation of the original Sarval Jnana Taro, from which he had 15 years earlier translated 52 verses into Tamil without knowing of the existence of a translation of the whole work made more than 10 years earlier. This is a great revelation to him. He hurriedly turns to the verses he has translated and compares them with the corresponding ones of the older translation. The difference he finds to be very small due to the difference in their viewpoints, his being pure Advaita and the other's Shiva Siddhanta. He goes on reading with great joy. 28th June 1948, 8:30 a.m. The morning is very cool and fresh after last night's shower. Incense is burning in profusion near Maharshi's couch. The peace, like the perfumes of the incense and the flowers, is all-pervading. The Tamil paper comes. Maharshi opens it and sees a caricature of Sri C. Rajagopalacharyar, our Governor-General, wearing the naval uniform and cap of Lord Mountbatten, his predecessor. Everything except the face is Mountbatten, his predecessor. Bhagavan utters a loud chuckle and turns to us to explain the joke. We enjoyed more his innocent joy than the artist's sketch. In the end, Maharshi remarks, "This resembles the work of Maya. The real is hidden in the unreal sheaths, just as Rajaji is hidden in Mountbatten's clothes." Mr. C. sat near the master's couch and read aloud the following verse from Viveka Chudamani. "This, the blissful sheath, Anandamaya Kosha, has its fullest play in deep sleep, whilst in the dream and waking states it has only a partial manifestation, occasioned by the experience of agreeable objects." Sri Bhagavan commented, "In Sushupti, deep sleep, one enjoys a whole ocean of bliss, like a king, whereas in the other two states the range of bliss is as wide as other classes of men, from the king down to the penniless. Sushupti is often characterized as the state of ignorance. No, it is the pure state. There is full awareness in it and total ignorance in the waking state. It is said to be ajnana, ignorance only in relation to the false jnana, knowledge, prevalent in Jagrat. Really speaking, Jagrat is ajnana and Sushupti prajnana, wisdom. If Sushupti is not the real state, where does the intense peace come from to the sleeper? It is everybody's experience that nothing in Jagrat can compare with the bliss and well-being derived from deep sleep, when the mind and the senses are absent. What does it all mean? It means that bliss comes only from inside ourselves, and that it is most intense, free from thoughts and perceptions, which create the world and the body. That is when we are in our pure being, which is Brahman, the Self. In other words, the being alone is bliss, and the mental superimpositions are ignorance and therefore the cause of misery. That is why Samadhi is also described as Sushupti in Jagrat. The blissful pure being which prevails in deep sleep is experienced in Jagrat, when the mind and the senses are fully alert but active. June 29th, 8:30 a.m. The devotional songs are heard from Triti on the radio by the Maharshi's side. He reads a Tamil paper, apparently unconcerned. But those who know him guess that his whole attention is centered on the music, till he dozes off to the tune of the flute and the tabla. I understand he hardly sleeps in the night. Every now and then he eludes the attendants and goes out alone. Hence 3 of them nowadays keep a constant watch in the night, lest he should go out by himself and fall without anyone nearby to help him. July 1st, 1948, 10 a.m. Maharshi returns from his short walk and hardly sits, when a very small boy carrying 2 small mangoes comes, and instead of placing them on the special offerings table, he shoves them in Bhagavan's hands. Maharshi laughs, keeps one and returns the other to the child, who immediately puts it to his mouth and bites. Maharshi laughs louder and says, "Not like that." The boy returns, munching, to his mother. July 25th, Sunday, 9 a.m. Maharshi, while writing, listens to the music program on the radio. He writes as usual, resting the pad on his raised right knee. Often he stops writing and beats time to the music. The comic part in Tamil follows. The dialogue must be extremely droll to cause him to try hard to stifle his laughter. At times he is so overwhelmed by it that he stops writing and chuckles aloud, looking around for response. July 26, 9:30 a.m. Maharshi is seriously occupied on the manuscript, which he is correcting with Mr. Visvanathan, who sits down to carry out his instructions. Bhagavan is doing hard thinking. I have never before seen him so involved in thoughts. His eyes are wide, and the eyeballs roll from side to side as thoughts roll in his mind, till he finds the right construction of a sentence or the idea he needs, when he turns to Mr. V and dictates to him. It is now 10 a.m., 15 minutes too late for going out. The attendant, who had been hesitating since some minutes, draws his attention to it. He looks at the timepiece and cries, "Oh la la, it is 10 o'clock. Why didn't you tell me? Look at that, 10 o'clock, and they didn't tell me." He quickly takes the bottle of ointment, lubricates his joints, and rises in haste. July 27th, 10:15 a.m. Maharshi calls the old devotees Professor Venkataramaya and Mr. Visvanathan and makes them sit down. Mr. V reads Atma Bodha of Sri Shankaracharya, one verse in Sanskrit and one in Tamil. Maharshi and Professor V follow in copies in their hands. The Tamil verses are Maharshi's translation of it, on which he has been occupied since about a week. There has already been a Tamil translation in existence, but it did not please the Maharshi. 9:30 a.m. Sri Maharshi is absorbed in writing. Mrs. Mazumdar, a Bengali devotee, comes in with a tray of fruits and a bottle wrapped in tissue paper in her hand. She places them on the offerings table, prostrates, and goes to her place. From the center of his eye, Sri Bhagavan espies the bottle, and without raising his head calls the attendant to fetch it, which the attendant does. He coolly takes it and carefully reads the label. Once, twice, even the smallest type he strains his eyes to read. Then he returns the bottle as indifferently as a child does to an object in which it is not interested. Yane, take it away, it is oil. He tells the attendant and resumes his writing. His power of observation is amazing, and his show of curiosity in the smallest object, without the slightest desire for it or for anything under the sun, is still more amazing, though delightfully naive. August 17th, 1948, 10:15 a.m. Mr. Rappold, an American devotee, opens his eyes from meditation, in which he seems to have been deeply sunk, and raises his voice. Bhagavan, what should a devotee do at the time of death? A devotee never dies, rather he is already dead. Then he stops and waits for a competent translator. Devaraja Mudaliar enters. Bhagavan completes the answer. What should a devotee do at the time of death? What can he do? Whatever a man thinks in his lifetime, so he does in his last moment. The worldly man thinks of his worldly affairs, and the devotee of devotion and spiritual matters. But a jnani, having no thoughts of any kind, remains the same. His thoughts having died long ago, his body also died with them. Therefore for him there is no such thing as death. Again, people fear death because they fear to lose their possessions. When they go to sleep, they do not have such fear at all. Although sleep resembles death in leaving all possessions behind, it causes no fear in their hearts, because of the knowledge that the next morning they will enter into their possessions once again. The jnani, having no sense of possession, is entirely free from the fear of death. He remains the same after death as before it. August 28th. From early morning, people started flocking from the town to the ashram on the rumor that the Maharshi had passed away. Many of them came with tears flowing from their eyes, but became happy on seeing him in good health. In the evening, Sri Bhagavan tells everybody and jokes about it. "A man," he said, "in the morning gave me his namaskar and then told me of the rumor of my death. I asked him to see for himself." Today being the Tamil anniversary of his arrival at Tiruvannamalai, 1896, some enemies of the ashram played this practical joke. God forgive them, for they know not what they do, I thought to myself. 15 September. A visitor hands the Maharshi a very beautiful walking stick, which seems to be made of the best ebony. Maharshi takes it, turns it on all sides, and carefully examines every part of it, then stretches it back to the giver, who signifies that it is an offering for Bhagavan. Sri Bhagavan replies, "What will I do with it?" And turning to the disciples, he smilingly says, "In olden days I used to make and give away sticks. Nowadays I am being presented with them. What will I do with them? If I take this stick, it will remain here unused till someone will one day carry it off. Then the presenter will feel sorry. Will it not then be better for him to take it back right now and see it? He will always remember me." The devotees laughed, and the visitor's depression turned to elation, which made him exclaim, "Your grace has overwhelmed me. I will cherish it all my life, as it has been hallowed by Bhagavan's touch." February 22nd, 1949. About a fortnight ago, the ashram doctor, Dr. Shankar Rao, assisted by Dr. Srinivasa Rao, removed a very small growth from the left elbow of the Maharshi. Since then it has remained bandaged, but today the bandage has been removed and it is left exposed. It is presumed to have healed. March 2nd, 1949, 5:15. The very aged ashram Stapi, the master sculptor, who has been absent since a long time, probably due to old age ailments, came in tottering, carrying fruit offerings. As the Maharshi saw him approach, his eyes opened widely and shone with extreme delight, as if he had seen a long-missed friend, which the old Stapi observed. Stapi was so touched by these signs of Bhagavan's affection that his whole body shook. He wanted to give expression to his love and adoration for Sri Bhagavan, but he did not know how to do it. Finally, he yielded to his impulse, and contravening the ashram rule, which forbade the touch of the master's body, fell flat on Maharshi's feet and legs and bathed them with tears. Two attendants gently helped him to rise and gave him a seat very near Bhagavan's couch. After he calmed down, Sri Maharshi inquired after his health, the cause of his absence, and all his other news. It was a sight to see Sri Bhagavan so deeply moved in meeting again an old ashram worker, who had taken a leading part in the architectural designs of his mother's temple according to the rules prescribed by the Hindu Shastras. March 18th. Kumbha Abhishekam, the consecration ceremony according to the Hindu rites of the temple, built over the remains of Maharshi's mother, known as Mat Rubu Teswara, which started on the 14th, has ended today. Humanity, masses of it, started pouring in the ashram since the 13th, from all over India, especially from the neighboring villages. The yagna ceremony began on the 14th at 8:30 p.m., when Sri Maharshi sat on an armchair, and not very far from his left foot on the floor sat Sri Shankaracharya of Puri, who had arrived that morning for the purpose. All round him sat a large number of devotees, visitors, and a huge crowd. The brief ceremony was over by 9 p.m., but when Maharshi was taken to open the new big hall attached to the temple, being too weak to turn the colossal key of the door, the young Stapi turned it for him. He was taken directly to the inner temple and helped over the short flight of steps and made to touch the stone Sri Chakra, which stands immediately behind the lingam, as the symbol of the creative power latent in the formless spirit, Chit. He was then taken out and made to sit for the first time on the stone couch in the new temple hall, which was covered with red velvet cushions. People began to prostrate before him, half a dozen at a time. After a while, he was taken out and lifted into the yagasala opposite the hall, where a brief ceremony was performed. By then, Maharshi showed signs of exhaustion and had therefore to be taken immediately to bed for the night's rest at 10 p.m. On the 15th morning, the crowd swelled to over 10,000. Sri Maharshi's couch was placed on the north veranda of the new hall. Musicians with flutes, violins, and tablas played by his side. Yagna ceremony went on at top strength in all the 3 yagasalas erected for the purpose. Flames leaped from dozens of specially constructed fire pits, fed by pure ghee and a special kind of sticks. Flame and smoke rose sky-high to the loud chanting of more than 100 priests. All this was drowned by thousands of voices from the crowd. The sight was impressive. The most silent man in this huge din was Sri Bhagavan himself, who was fully indrawn and totally unconcerned on the surface. But his disciples knew his joy at the fulfillment of a 10-year-old desire to leave for prosperity a spiritual heritage of priceless value. A desire not of his own, but of a man, the Sarvadhikari, who thought himself an instrument of Sri Bhagavan's divine will, conveyed to him not by word of mouth, but by mere thought. The value of this temple consists in its treasuring in its bosom the body of the mother of one of the greatest saints and sages that have ever lived. Also, in its being built stone by stone under the very eyes of the Maharshi, and in its most sacred portions being hallowed by his personal visits and touch. The dream has now taken shape. 10 years of tireless efforts have come to an end. The 15th and the 16th saw the crowd increasing by the hour. Such was the influx of the visitors from the Mofusil that by the 16th evening, when the brass vessels, the kumbhas, about 6 in number, were taken to the top of the gopurams, towers, the total was estimated to be over 15,000. The grand climax came on the 17th morning. From the Morvi guest house to the north wall of the ashram, there was one compact mass of human heads. Although it was an orderly crowd, movements were impeded, despite all the efforts of the volunteers to keep a way open. The chief minister of Madras state, Sri Ormandur Ramaswamy Reddyar, was expected. All the highest officials of the district and many magnates from Madras came by cars. At 11 a.m., Sri Maharshi was taken out to give the special signal to the priest on the gopurams, temple towers, to start the abhishekam. He gently raised his hand, and the bathing ceremony on the top of the temple started. Then he was taken to the inner temple, and made to place his hand on the lingam, just then installed in front of Sri Chakra. The lingam was soldered to its stone platform with 20 tolas of gold, 8 ounces, contributed by devotees. Then he returned to the new hall and sat on the stone couch, over which stretched a white silk canopy embroidered with silver presented by the Maharaja of Dharampur. Then the Sarvadhikari, Sri Nirajananda Swami, was called and made to sit opposite the Maharshi, when Mrs. Taliyarkan read a short speech in English in his praise for his earnestness, his sincerity, and his unremitting efforts in building up the ashram and the temple, and garlanded him. The speech was immediately translated into Tamil, sentence by sentence, which pleased him considerably. The day ended with music and songs given by aristocratic young ladies from Madras, followed by temple music, which continued till about midnight, when Sri Maharshi went to bed, thus closing the Kumbha Abhishekam series of ceremonies and functions for the time. March 27, 1949. The lump which was removed from Maharshi's left elbow last month, and which was thought to be healing satisfactorily, subsequently started to grow again, so that the eminent surgeon, Dr. Raghavachari, came today from Madras with surgical instruments to remove it. Sri Maharshi entered the ashram's clinic at 9:40 a.m. The operation lasted 20 minutes and ended at about 10:30. The lump, which has been temporarily diagnosed as neuroma, is seated on the ulnar nerve with 2 fibers in it. A section is sent for microscopic examination. The surgeon, we are told, performed the operation skillfully by cutting deep and removing the last cell of the growth without injuring the ulnar nerve, which controls the forearm and fingers. He does not expect a recurrence of the growth. The whole afternoon, Maharshi remained somnolent due to the local anesthetic injection given to him before the operation. No one can tell if he is feeling any pain. April 18, 1949. Sri Bhagavan's wound from the operation of the 27th March has not yet completely healed. It is healing very slowly. Our anxiety is not yet at an end. A week ago came the analyst report which diagnosed it as sarcoma. It has since a few days been mildly bleeding, but Sri Bhagavan's moods are as bright as ever, and the luster in his eyes is not in the least dimmed. This morning a small boy, about 10 years old, by my side spoke to me in Telugu. Seeing that he was not understood, he walked slowly to the Maharshi's couch, leaned on it, and talked hurriedly to the master. Maharshi was all smiles and tenderness to him. Then he turned to us and explained that the child, having seen him lubricating his joints a little while ago, offered to do it himself, because, in his opinion, Sri Bhagavan was too old to rub them effectively. Then, turning to the child, he told him, "If you are going to do the rubbing for me, then you must also do the eating for me," and called the attendant to give him bananas. But before the fruit was brought, the little boy disappeared. April 20th. Sri Maharshi's health is causing grave anxiety to the 3 doctors, who have been in constant attendance on him, as well as to the devotees. A lady devotee wept much and went to him in tears, and asked him to give her his disease and be cured of it, saying, "Bhagavan, you who are curing others must cure yourself, and spare your life for us, your devotees." Once, twice, he waved her off, and seeing her great concern, finally replied with great tenderness, "Why are you so much attached to this body? Let it go." At about 5 p.m., the local police officials and Mrs. T approached Sri Maharshi and explained to him all the arrangements they had made for the opening ceremony of the temple erected by this lady over the Patala Lingam. They wanted to know the year in which the first photograph of his was taken at Tiruvannamalai, and a few other details. Sri Maharshi replied, "It was taken 4 years after my coming, in 1900. Originally that lingam was on the surface of the ground, like all other samadhis, before the big temple was built, but in course of time the ground level rose. When much later the 1,000-pillar mantapam was built about 4 or 5 feet higher than the ordinary level, the lingam sunk still lower, so much so that it earned for itself the name Patala, underground lingam. In those days I was alone with the elephant, which was always tied in the mantapam. They prostrated and left, but Sri Bhagavan continued his reminiscences. I stayed about 6 months in the big temple, in which Patala Lingam occupies a small corner. September 1896 to March 1897, in all the places in it. Urchins used to run after me, and when I hid myself in Patala Lingam, they used to pelt me with stones and potsherds from outside, none of which, however, could reach me, as I used to sit in the southeast corner. The urchins never dared to come in because of the extreme darkness in the pit and the broken steps which could not be seen from above. April 24th. Radium has been applied to Sri Maharshi's wound for the first time today. Everyone is depressed, but Sri Bhagavan himself is as jovial as ever, though visibly weaker. At 3 p.m., Mr. Kalyana Sudaram, a devotee and an ex-ashram worker, brings him a postcard from his brother, in which the latter inquires after Maharshi's health and asks whether the master had that morning undergone the 3rd operation, to which Maharshi replied, "No, it is not an operation, but radium application. The lump is growing from inside like a lingam, but it is giving me no trouble. I am feeling no pain nor any inconvenience. The doctors have taken some slough from it and have sent it to America to see if they can use radium or not, but no answer has so far come. There are two kinds of tumors, malignant and non-malignant. Whatever it may be, it will take time to heal. Why worry? After a few minutes, Attendant Venkataratnam goes to inquire on his own initiative and returns to inform Bhagavan that no slough has been sent to America, at which Maharshi exclaims, "Is that so?" and waves his hand to indicate his indifference. We all smiled at his ingenuousness. April 27, 1949. Last night at 6:30 p.m., Sri Ramaya arrived with Dr. Nambiar and Dr. T.N.K. All are old devotees. Sri Ramaya approached the sofa and cautiously inquired, "What is this, a boil on Bhagavan's elbow?" Sri Maharshi replied, "Yes, I told them not to cut it, but the doctors insisted that it should be removed. Let it be, it will be all right," and continued to talk cheerfully to the three men. The two doctors advised him not to move the arm and disturb the radium, nor to touch it with the other hand. He waved them off with his right hand as if to say, "Why all this fuss?" At 5:20 p.m. today, as soon as Maharshi returned from his evening walk and sat, he switched on the table fan by his side and started reading some notes. Attendant Satyananda started fanning his back. Sri Maharshi asked him to stop, which he immediately did. A little later, Attendant Venkata Ratnam, who had just arrived, quietly slipped behind the master, who by now got absorbed in reading, and fanned him. Soon Sri Bhagavan noticed it and turned squarely on Venkata. "Oh, how great is your bhakti! Look how stealthily you came behind me and fanned me. Aha! If your bhakti is so great, why don't you go and fan all these devotees? Romba Vishesham, Romba Sari. Oh, very important, excellent." Thus he taunted and railed at him. Then he turned this way and that to complain against V.R. for full 10 minutes. After about an hour, on seeing T.P. Ramachandra, the lawyer sitting by the side of the attendants, he repeated the whole scene to him. Look at the great devotion of this man. Although this morning I had protested against anyone fanning me, in the evening he stealthily went behind my back while I was engaged in reading and fanned me. I told him if he had so much devotion for me, he should also fan all these devotees. It is said that service to the devotees is as meritorious as service to the Guru. Turning to Visar, "Yes, go and do it. He thinks his tapas to be so powerful as to compel me to bend to his will. Romba Naladu. Aha, Romba Sari. Very good, excellent." Last night at about 9 o'clock, 3 doctors came from Madras and took X-ray photos of Maharshi's arm. This morning, 2 more joined them. They decided to remove the radium and watch the effect. It has, for the present, arrested the growth to a great extent. About a week ago, they were unanimous in their recommendation to amputate the arm. But Dr. Radhavachari, the surgeon, advised the use of radium first. Today, however, he found amputation unavoidable, and at 4:45 p.m., he saw Sri Maharshi alone in the bathroom and told him, "I want to be frank with you, Bhagavan, so that we may know the real position from the medical point of view and direct us. There are 2 ways of finishing this case. The first is scooping out the flesh right down to the bone, which will render that hand practically unusable. The other is sure and safer, namely, amputation of the whole left arm from the shoulder. It is now for Bhagavan to decide." Maharshi paused for a few seconds and replied, "As I let you look after your body, you will please let me look after mine," which made 1 or 2 devotees standing within earshot go aside and sob, for they felt that that decision of his amounted to a death sentence. Maharshi then walked back to the hall with supreme indifference. May 2nd, 1949. The temple bell went unrolling till noon, with beating of drums, loud prayers, and puja, officially closing the Kumbha Abhisekam ceremony, which started on the 14th March. At 5:15 p.m., Maharshi and Devaraja Muradiliyar talk about a Tamil book, which has been translated into English. Bhagavan tells a story from it. A traveler passed by a brook and sat by its side for rest. He saw a leaf drop from a tree. Half of it fell in the water, and the other half on the land. The former turned into a fish and the latter into a bird, and the two started pulling each other. While the traveler was puzzling over this phenomenon, a demon swooped on him and lifted him up to his abode, where there were 999 other men who had been similarly kidnapped. They were men who had fallen from the path of virtue and piety. They had been very well treated and sumptuously fed by the demon, their host, till the newcomer brought their number to 1,000, when the demon prepared them all for a sacrifice to his god. The men started vehemently abusing the newcomer for being the cause of their imminent death. Dire dread made them direct their minds towards God, Lord Subramanyam, who then appeared, killed the demon, and saved them. On the 30th night, the doctors gave Maharshi blood transfusion, about 20 ounces, which continued from 10:30 p.m. till 2 a.m. He refused to take another bottle of it because it would interfere with his usual program of going out at 5:30 a.m. May 8th. This morning, Dr. Lakshmipati, the well-known medical practitioner in both allopathy and Ayurveda, arrived from Madras. Before seeing the wound, he questioned Maharshi on the 5 koshas and the 3 bodies spoken of in the Hindu Shastras. Bhagavan, as usual, gave him an Advaitic answer, which kept him thinking hard. In the evening he saw the wound and declared it not as bad as I thought it would be, and directed Dr. Shankar Rao to apply on it a certain herb, which he named and which he declared would complete the healing process. Today the tumor seems to have completely disappeared due to the application of radium, and the wound is nearly closed, although its base is still hard. Maharshi looks also much better and healthier. The radium needle was removed on the 5th. May 9th, 10:30 a.m. A small bag of kadaka, myrobalans, came by post. Seeing it, the Maharshi said, "Oh, kadaka, but I am using it daily," and showed some by his side. The Ayurveda school teacher, Sri Ramachandra Rao of Bangalore, got up and said, "If we grind some of these nuts and apply the paste on Bhagavan's wound, it will surely heal." Everybody was puzzled at the simplicity of the treatment and the magnitude of its effect. Bhagavan remarked with a twinkle in his eye, "Oh yes, he is a doctor and knows." All of us laughed, but loudest of all laughed the Ayurveda himself. We are told that the action of the radium will continue to the 5th of June. That Sri Bhagavan's tumor is a peculiar neurosarcoma and not cancer. Cancer is constitutional, so that if cut out of one place, it may appear in another, whereas sarcoma is a local growth, which appears and reappears in the same place. If it appears on a limb and that limb is amputated, there is an end of it. But in this case, Sri Maharshi is definitely against amputation. May 14th, 1949. His Excellency the Governor-General of India, Sri C. Rajagopala Charyar, arrived last night in a special saloon with His Excellency the Governor of Madras, the Maharaja of Bhavnagar, and Her Excellency the Maharani of Bhavnagar, with their aide-de-camps and retinue, to open the temple over the Patala Lingam. Mrs. Telayarkan, the hostess, received His Excellency exactly at 8 o'clock this morning in the big Arunachaleswara temple in the town. after introducing to him Mr. J.H. Tapore as the donor and architect of the temple, his family and a few others, she delivered her welcoming speech in English, to which he replied in Tamil. Then he opened the temple at about 8:45, after which he returned to his saloon. Their Excellencies the Maharaja and Maharani of Bhavnagar drove to the ashram and sat on 2 chairs opposite the Maharshi, in a straight line with his feet. His Excellency said in English to the master that it had long been his own and his wife's wish to have his darshan and sit on the floor, rather than on chairs like now. Sri Maharshi remained silently gazing in space, as he usually does when not engaged in any work. Their hostess spoke to them in Gujarati, their mother tongue, and after 10 minutes they rose, bowed to the master, and left to worship in the ashram temple and see the ashram round. At noon their Excellencies and party returned to Madras, after lunching at the railway station with the Governor-General. June 1st. A small ceremony was performed this morning which made the new temple hall the permanent darshan hall, in which, from today on, Sri Bhagavan will meet devotees and visitors. After the ceremony, a big block of granite stone was brought and placed at a point outside, which the Maharshi could see from his couch across the south door, facing him. It is to be his statue. It was plastered with turmeric and vermilion, and camphor light was waved before it for good luck by the chief sculptor, Stapati, who made the first chip on it with his hammer and chisel. Last evening, a very old disciple of the Maharshi, now an old man, prostrated before him. I noticed a gauze bandage round his left elbow, and thought to myself that it looked as if he were imitating Sri Bhagavan. Hardly I finished this thought when Sri Maharshi, observing him, laughingly remarked, "Oh, you are competing with me. You have the wound in the same place as myself." Everybody laughed except the old man himself, whose sense of humor seemed to have deserted him at the moment. 15th June. The dressing has been removed. There is a prominent lump surrounded by a red ring, which does not augur well. Benzoin alone is painted over it. 25th June, 1949. Last night at about 9 o'clock, when Maharshi's left hand was being massaged, he asked that the upper arm, where the wound is located, should be also massaged, because it felt itchy. The attendant answered that the doctors had ordered him not to massage it lest it should bleed. "Is that so?" Maharshi remarked, and set himself to massage it, rather briskly with the right hand, which immediately drew blood. This morning at about 8 o'clock, Sri Bhagavan started talking. Yesterday, Professor Subbaramaya spoke to me of curing diseases by willpower, implying that I should cure my arm by my own will. Did I ask the tumor to come, so that I may tell it to go? It came of its own accord. What then have I or my will got to do with it? And so on. He seems to be determined to leave his disease entirely to itself, without a vestige of a wish to be well again, or an effort to think what should best be done for it. He worries over it even less than he would if it were a mere lump of mud on the wall behind him. July 5th. On the 3rd, the doctors agreed that no more radium should be applied, as the last application had burnt the skin and left the flesh bare. In any case, Sri Bhagavan will not allow radium application any more than he will allow amputation. The ashram authorities had therefore to call in the herbalist, who had years ago treated the fracture of his collarbone. Today he came and applied some herb paste with the help of the attending doctors. Their Highnesses of Mandi arrived with their son on the 3rd. Today Rani Saheba timorously approached Sri Maharshi with prayer to him to cure himself. In her gentle, soft voice she threatened, "I will not leave this place till Bhagavan promises me to cure himself." He merely waved his hand, dismissing the proposal as that of the least consequence. July 6. Muruganar Swami, a very old and distinguished disciple, a Tamil scholar and poet, handed Maharshi a Tamil poem composed by himself, praying Sri Bhagavan to live up to 100 years in perfect health. The devotee read it aloud. Hearing it, Sri Maharshi said, "There is a story of the Vaishnava saint, in whose centenary celebration his disciples prayed that he should live for another 100 years. You want me to live up to 100, so that you may at the end of it pray for another 100? 15th July. Bhagavan's health seems to be improving. Since a few days, pieces have been falling from the tumor, the last portion of which dropped yesterday. Today the herbalist applied a highly irritating herb on the wound to suck out all the morbid matter from its base, which is said to be now flat. Internal medicines have also been given since some days. By evening the irritation must have reached considerable proportions as to cause shivering and perhaps feverishness, judging from Maharshi's listlessness, somnolence, and drugged look, although as usual he never complained of pain or any inconvenience. But when, at 4:45, he prepared to go out, he showed signs of extreme weakness. His whole body shook, and the legs were utterly unable to stand or bear his weight even for one step. We all thought that he was going to collapse in a heap before our eyes, but somehow he steadied himself, and with the attendant's support managed to go to the bathroom, where the old application was substituted by a new soothing herb. On his return, the weakness and the forcible dragging of the legs were more pronounced, so that by the time he crossed the frightfully high stone threshold into the hall and looked at us, signs of death were on his face. The strain on the heart from this exertion, and probably from the drug, was tremendous, as we judged from his loud panting, even after having dropped exhausted on his couch. Every one of the 300 men and women devotees present turned pale and remained transfixed to the ground, till the attendants made signs to them to sit down. Even in a solemn moment like that, when life hung by the flimsiest thread, Sri Maharshi's solicitude for the guest and devotees occupied the first place in his mind, for he hardly rested than he called attendant Satyananda, who had supported his hip joints in his journey to and from the bathroom, and whispered something to him, which was later explained as his declared desire that the dining routine should not be altered, which implied that he would not have his dinner alone in the darshan hall, as he had suspected such a plan was afoot, but as usual in the dining hall with others. The dining hall is situated at a great distance from the darshan hall, and its southern entrance, by which Maharshi usually enters, is preceded by 7 steep steps. To go there for dinner would compel Sri Bhagavan not only to make the distance on foot, but also cross the terrible threshold of the hall, as well as climb all the 7 steps, which is far more than his state of health would permit. A few of his important disciples went to him one after another, and begged of him to consent to dine alone in the darshan hall where he sat, but he refused. Our hearts were in our mouths when the dinner bell rang at 7:30 p.m., and we saw him preparing to get down and walk. Walk he did, and with firm steps too, but in order to make him avoid the southern entrance, he was requested to enter by the northern one, which had only 2 easy steps. But he turned down the request by moving to the southern door and climbing the steep steps. He tottered for a while, and seeing the attendants ready to hold him, he stopped, turned to them, and said, "If you leave me alone, I will walk far steadier," and entered the dining hall unaided.